New small cars with petrol engines seem to be disappearing fast, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't buy one. In fact, for lots of people, something frugal, affordable and small is all they're really looking for in a car. And of the small cars still left, this new Peugeot 208 could be one of the best. In this review, we're explaining why. Now, the 208 name hasn't always been attached to a great car. In fact, the first generation 208 arrived in 2012 at a time when there were loads of small car choices around that were very, very strong indeed. And to be honest, that car struggled to compete with its rivals at the time, like the Seat Ibiza and VW Polo. The second generation 208, launched in 2019, was far better in every department and went on to become one of the best-selling cars in Europe. This here is still the second generation model, which was given a facelift last year. Those updates gave the 208 a slightly different look, and at the front you can see Peugeot's added its lighting signature with these 3 claws here, and there's a similar look at the rear. You can also see Peugeot's new shield on the front, and either side on higher trim levels you have this body coloured pattern. There's new lettering around the car, and there are 7 paint colours to choose from, including a new grey and this new Agueda yellow. Although in certain lighting it does look a bit green, doesn't it? And green is an appropriate theme with the new 208 because of what's going on under here, but it might not all be quite as it seems. So let's talk about these engine options. The new car starts with a 1.2 PureTech 100, and that is a regular 1.2 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine with 99 brake horsepower. There used to be a less powerful PureTech 75, but that isn't available anymore. Above that, you'll find a hybrid 110 and a hybrid 145. And a small car like this, wearing a hybrid badge, might make you start dreaming about high MPGs and low fuel bills, like you get in a Toyota Yaris and a hybrid version of a Renault Clio. But calling this a hybrid is stretching the definition pretty far, because this actually is a mild hybrid. It gets a 48 volt mild hybrid setup that includes a small electric motor on the automatic gearbox, which is there to help improve the smoothness of the stop-start engine system, offer a bit of help in terms of performance, and generally try and improve the fuel economy as well. But to be fair to this 208, it can actually move along powered by pure electric power alone, something that is very rare among mild hybrids. Still though, it can only do it for very short periods of time at low speeds. This is not a proper, full, regular hybrid, like the Yaris and the hybrid version of the Clio. In those cars, we've shown that you can average close to 60 miles per gallon in real-world driving conditions. In this hybrid 145 version of the 208, we've been achieving more like 50 miles per gallon in real-world driving conditions, which is still good, but not as good as those proper hybrid rivals. And for the record, we carried out some real-world fuel economy tests on the 1.2 PureTech 100 version of the 208, and we achieved 47.9 miles per gallon, which isn't as impressive as a full hybrid Yaris, but for a small car with a regular petrol engine is still a decent result. And it also shows that the difference in terms of fuel economy between the non-hybrid and the hybrids in the 208 lineup might not be as much as you'd expect. Still, that does mean whichever version of the 208 you go for, you will be getting a small car that is pretty frugal. And also, for a small car, this is pretty practical by the class standards as well. So in the boot, we managed to fit 5 carry-on size suitcases below the parcel shelf, which is the same number that we could fit in an Audi A1 and a Clio. But that is the regular version of the Clio, because if you go for a hybrid Clio, then the boot in that car is much smaller. Thankfully, that isn't a problem that you face in the 208, whether you go for a PureTech 100 or a hybrid 145. The boot back here is exactly the same size, which is good. There isn't, though, anything particularly clever or helpful to point out in the boot of this 208. So you do have a bit of a loading lip at the front, and even though there's space for a spare tyre, there's no fancy underfloor storage or height adjustable boot floor. There aren't any handy storage compartments either side of the boot either, but still the space that you have is fine, and you can of course throw down the rear seats. They split fold 60/40. So no amazingly practical features to point out, but the overall space that you're given back here by the standards of the small car class is very good. Now, the rear seats, it's actually a bit of a squeeze to get into them in the first place compared to other small cars, because the door openings of the 208 are pretty narrow. But once you are in here, you'll find more room than what you have in the back of a Clio. but you'd still probably only describe the legroom and the headroom as just enough for adults rather than generous. So you can see the design of the front seats does allow for decent knee room, and I've got good space for my feet under the seat in front, which really helps. But headroom, if you're an adult trying to sit up straight, is fairly restricted, and you'll find your head pressing up against the roof lining. And just bear in mind as well that if you go for a GT or GT premium model in the 208, then you can, as an optional extra, add a sunroof, but that eats in even more to the available headroom back here. Now inside you'll also find a bit of a lump in the floor, so you can fit 3 people side by side here, but of course it's going to be a bit of a squeeze. And in terms of storage, it's not particularly great back here because the door bins are tiny. The pockets on the backs of the rear seats are also very small, and it doesn't feel particularly plush or amazing back here because you've got these hard plastics on the door as well. You also can't pull down anything from this middle seat to reveal a central armrest or extra cup holders either. And overall, a VW Polo is more accommodating for taller passengers in its rear seats. But if a rear seat area which is spacious and luxurious is a priority for you, then you're probably looking in the wrong class of car. And actually, compared to its rivals, this 208 back here is fairly good. Now, up front, every version of the new 208 now gets a 10-inch touchscreen infotainment system, rather than the entry-level trim having a smaller screen. That isn't the case anymore. There's also been a slight update to the graphics on the digital driver display, but aside from that, this is basically the same interior that you had before, which isn't a problem because it means that this 208 still offers basically the best small car interior you can buy, which definitely matches an Audi A1 for plushness. In this interior, there's a real great mix of high-end soft touch materials, and it's generally very, very good in here. It does, though, still get this slightly unconventional layout where you've got this small steering wheel and a driver display above it. And for me, in my driving position, this kind of works, even though it feels a bit unusual. But other reviewers on the team have sat in this car and found that the top of the steering wheel can block the digital driver display, which isn't perfect. And it does show that this is a setup that still isn't going to work for absolutely everyone. The 208 is also a little bit harder to see out of than something like a VW Polo because these pillars are a little bit thicker than in that car. And also at the back, visibility again isn't particularly amazing. But it's not the end of the world because every version of this car gets rear parking sensors, and as you work up the trim levels, you can add front parking sensors and a reversing camera. And also, this is a fairly small car, so visibility really isn't a huge problem in this car, even if it isn't among the very best in the class. A bigger problem than that, though, is the fact that this touchscreen infotainment system is mainly controlled through the touchscreen itself and a fairly hit and miss voice control system. Of course, it would be better to have more physical controls to be able to operate it, and it's a big frustration that if you want to change the temperature or the fan speed, again, that has to be done through the touchscreen or the voice control system. And in both cases, it's far fiddlier to do that than if you just had physical controls to adjust both. And it's also frustrating that the temperature and the fan speed aren't permanently visible on this touchscreen. So if you're running Apple CarPlay or if you're on a different menu, you've got to hit a shortcut button to then be able to go in and adjust those fairly basic climate control settings, which is a bit of a shame. But still, overall in here, lots of things are very good. And storage is also a real strength of the 208 as well, because under this well-placed, nicely cushioned armrest, you've got a neatly designed, generously spacious cubby. You've got 2 cup holders, you've got another storage tray at the top here, and this pop-down storage compartment at the front as well, where on this trim level you can see we've got some wireless phone charging. And the door bins are a good size as well. So overall, the interior is a real strength of the 208, particularly when it comes to quality. And the good thing is, you don't have to buy the most expensive version of this car to get a really strong interior, because even the cheapest version of the 208 in style trim gets the same fundamental setup and a fairly similar look inside as well. And also the pricing of a 208 in style trim is really, really competitive compared to the rivals that it's up against. In fact, it undercuts a whole host of the other small cars that it's up against. And another good thing is that version of the car comes with a stronger engine than a lot of its other rivals in their cheapest forms as well. The only thing is, though, from there, stepping up a level in the 208 range brings a massive increase in price. And from that point, in mid-spec Allure trim, Although the pricing is still competitive compared to its rivals, it's not quite as compelling as that entry-level version of the car. But the 208 can hold its own on the road even compared to the most expensive small cars around, because this really stands out, particularly for the ride comfort that it offers. This is one of the most comfortable small cars around, at any speed really, but it's especially impressive on the motorway. It's very smooth, it's really well cushioned, and it's also impressive in the way that it rides over broken parts of road or potholes and things like that. It's also better tied down than things like a Citroen C3, which can be a bit wobbly and all over the place on the road. That isn't a sensation you have at all in this 208, even though it is on the soft side in terms of its suspension setup. But the flip side of that is, because of the relatively soft suspension, it's not a particularly thrilling thing dynamically. A Renault Clio and Audi A1 both handle with a bit more sharpness than the 208. This isn't terrible to drive, but on a twisty road, you're going to have more fun in a Clio or an A1. But for lots of people, that is a compromise that they'd be happy to make, because they'd prioritise ride comfort over driving dynamics. This is also a quiet car on the move as well, so even if you're on the motorway, it's pretty hushed inside here. We're focusing on the fuel-powered versions of the 208 in this review, but there is also a fully electric E208 available as well, with a choice of 2 different batteries offering a range of up to 248 miles. A performance-focused E208 GTI has also just been revealed, promising 276 brake horsepower and a 0 to 62 mile an hour time of 5.7 seconds, which is faster than an Alpine A290. Now, there isn't a performance-focused GTI version of the fuel-powered 208s, but regardless of that, the performance that is on offer is still absolutely fine in the PureTech and in the hybrids, particularly for the everyday types of driving that you're going to need them to do. Of course, the most powerful is the Hybrid 145, and that is the car that we're in now. But this really isn't the 208 at its best, because for something that wears a hybrid badge, this isn't particularly hybrid in the way that it goes about its business. So for example, the stop-start system in this car isn't actually that smooth. So the engine coughs and splutters and shudders into life, and it doesn't feel like there's a huge amount of electrical assistance in the performance that this offers off the line, because when you press the accelerator, there is still a bit of a delay before anything happens. And that is mainly down to the automatic gearbox here, that isn't quite as smooth in the shifts that it offers and crisp in its response that you'd hope. So really, looking at the lineup as a whole, the best, most recommendable 208 engine is the entry-level one, which is the cheapest, the 1.2 PureTech 100. When it comes to the trims, entry-level style can only be had with that PureTech 100 engine, but as we mentioned, the pricing of that entry-level version of this car is very competitive compared to the rivals that it's up against. It doesn't, though, get much in the way of luxuries, but you still have things like 16-inch alloys, heated door mirrors, automatic lights and air conditioning on the standard equipment list. It looks like the best value option in the lineup. Allure trim adds dual zone climate control, privacy glass, automatic wipers and power folding door mirrors, as well as a 3D style driver display and extra parking aids. But as we've said, it's a big jump up in price for this. GT adds 17-inch alloys, wireless phone charging, keyless entry and start, and an auto dimming rear view mirror, while top spec GT Premium adds some different materials inside. But these two versions are pretty pricey. Every version comes with a 3-year warranty, which isn't particularly amazing, and also Peugeot as a manufacturer hasn't performed amazingly in our reliability surveys over the years. In our latest reliability survey from 2024, the French manufacturer finished 19th out of 31 manufacturers, which isn't particularly great. The 208 does fare better when it comes to safety, and was given 4 stars out of 5 when it was tested by safety experts Euro NCAP in 2019. But a Clio received the full 5-star verdict. If you drill into the details of the test, the 208 is almost as good in most areas, but not quite as strong at protecting people outside the vehicle. All models come with a basic form of automatic emergency braking as standard, but you'll have to go for GT trim to get a more advanced system that works at night and can recognise cyclists as well as pedestrians. Traffic sign recognition and a driver attention alert system are both standard on all versions, as is lane keeping assistance, but blind spot monitoring is only available as part of the optional parking pack on the top trims. So the Peugeot 208 stands out because of its ride comfort, its hushed cruising manners, and its plush interior quality. The hybrid versions of this car aren't the most recommendable models, but if you stick with the 1.2 PureTech 100 in one of the cheaper trim levels, then this is one of the best small cars around. Thanks very much for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there and make sure you subscribe to our channel as well. And to read much more about the 208 and every car around, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.